Greetings, one and all. I wanted to do a little show on he who should not be named, not Voldemort, but the sun demon Sorat, or Soroth, depending on how you say it and spell it, and I'm going to do it from the Rudolf Steiner point of view. Now, the pictures that accompany this little show are taken from Greenwich Peninsula, and this beast, which I believe is done by Damien Hirst. Like, what is it? Why is it there? It's pretty awful, isn't it? It's huge. And I just thought that it would go quite well with this little show about he who should not be named. So the sun demon, so his occult name is Sorat, and that was given to him by the Kabbalists in ancient times in the ancient mystery schools. And the reason they did this was because obviously they wanted to, name something, and I think naming something does give it a bit more of an understanding. You can come to understand what this beast is. So he's a sun demon who is made from all the other evilness and darkness that comes from the different earlier cosmoses that come and go, the cycles of the universe. As Steiner says, we go through different epochs, from Saturn to Sun to Moon to Mercury and such like. And Zoroth or Sorat, he's like the debris that's left over from the previous cosmos. Steiner actually uses the word dross. And this dross is from the previous cosmic realms or world epochs, that's made up from all the evil intentions and actions that were created in that time to evolve into the new era. Only the goodness went, the light, the love, the working of the right hand path, the left hand path, and all the work done by black magicians, all the awful horrible things that occurred in that cosmos is left behind as the realms, the worlds, the planets, the people, all the other beings that are part of it evolve to the next stage. And Steiner says that this is where this beast comes from, this sun demon. He's made up of all the dross from the previous epochs. And he says, I'm just going to read a little bit from him. When the Earth began to be Earth, it had to go through another brief repetition of the Saturn, Sun and Moon states. Thus it went through repetitions because it became the present Earth, and now, while still in the actual Earth state, it must prophetically reflect ahead, Jupiter, Venus and Vulcan. Thus, within the actual state of the Earth, it passes through 7 states, which are usually called rounds. During the pre-mirrored Jupiter state, the Earth unites with the Sun. On this Jupiter-Earth, all the great cultures of time and the 7 intermediate periods occur once more, only much less sharply indicated. On this Jupiter-Earth, many beings still have the possibility of being saved, even the black magicians. It is the same again on Venus-Earth. There we have a 6th intermediary planetary state, but even there these retarded beings still stubbornly resist, and this state is decisive. On the Vulcan Earth, nothing can then be saved. On Venus Earth, in the last sub-temporal epoch, the last moment for salvation has come. That is why the ancient Kabbalists formed the word Sorat, because it contains the number 666. This is also the number of those people who, out of their free, refined will, have become black magicians by putting spiritual powers at the service of their egoism. The first dragon, therefore, is not a human being. He came from the spiritual world. The second dragon is reckoned to the animal nature, but is the most eminent sense the Bible reckons this number of the third group to human beings. Thus 666 is not the sign of an animal, but the number of a man. I'm going to end the quote there. Quite a lot to go into there. So 666 is put into is the number of the beast, which is the sun demon. But 666 can also relate to humans, black magicians and such like. Of course, there's still many of them around now. And to Rudolf Steiner, the sun demon is the two-horned beast in the Apocalypse, in the Book of the Apocalypse, which is why I think it's very important to read the Book of the Apocalypse, or the Book of Revelation, the last book in the Bible. And he's talking about how we obviously have to fight the dragon within us. So that's one dragon to deal with, our own inner dragon, and try to redeem that, not let it take us over. We don't slay it. We have to redeem it. We have to work with it. We have to recognize the darkness within ourselves and change it into the light. But there's always also this beast that is grown from all the dross that was from the previous round. So I also wanted to cover the Kabbalistic gematria, which many of you know is when a letter resonates with a number. Each letter in the olden days, in the ancient scripts, also represented a number. And Sorat is spelt in Hebrew S-R-T, I thought, but to make it 666, they've actually done it S-W-R-T, or S-W-R-T-H. So the Hebrew numbers become, for example, with the first letter S, Samek in Hebrew, is a 60. The second letter, this W, Wa, is a 6. Interesting that www, many people believe, is the 666, which is what I'm using the old interweb to obviously put this out. Resh is the third letter, which is an R, which relates to the number 200, and Tau is the fourth letter, which is the T, or the TH, and that relates to the number 400. So you add together them numbers for these letters, 400, 200, 6 and 60, comes to the number 666. And Steiner talks about how there's a secret hidden in the number of the beast 666, and he reminds us that it is the number of a man. But we must also remember that when the dark forces incarnate into what we would call a fleshy incarnation, for example, Lucifer was incarnated back in the Chinese Empire, about 3,000 years ago now, 2,000 years before Christ. He incarnated into a man. There is much discussion about Ahriman being incarnated into a fleshy incarnation, and that's happening now in our epoch. There's many debates as to when his birth date actually was. Will Sorat himself incarnate into a man? Who knows? But Steiner again guides us to the Book of the Apocalypse to look at all this, and he says, read the passage where John receives the book with the 7 seals, with this occult knowledge. Let us read it as it is described in the 4th chapter of Revelation. Quote, and immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and upon the throne sat one, and he that sat was like unto the stone of jasper and sardius. And round about the chair were 24 chairs, and upon the chairs sat 24 elders. End quote from the Book of Revelation. Continuing Steiner, which I've set before you in the 24 hours of the world day, day and night. And then what is further found in the 5th chapter, quote, and I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent into all the world. End quote from the Book of Revelation. And continuing Steiner, this occult sign underlies John's reference in the Apocalypse to the mysteries of the world's existence. Only those who know these can guess how profound a book the Apocalypse is, and what it means when the Lamb's adversary is portrayed as the beast with 2 horns. And then that's end quote from Steiner. He goes on to describe the symbol of the sun demon, which is kind of like a Y with a little tau, but kind of stretched and bent. It bends a little to the left, and its top parts of the Y, like 2 horns, are a little bit bent as well. Whereas we want to be the Y as a man, the Y that stands straight and stands with our arms upwards, so we're making the Y shape, so we're stretching our arms towards God, towards the divine higher. Whereas this symbol of the beast with two horns, this Y with its bent top parts, is trying to look away from the divine, shall we say. So Sorat is the sun demon, and he leads people into immoral actions. He keeps their people into their lower I, their lower states of themselves. This is why they find it difficult to reach up to their higher states and connect with the divine. So he's also known to be in the sun. He's like the adversary against, opposite the Christ, who is the Sun King. The Sorat is also a Sun King, but he's the Sun Demon. And from the sun he casts his dark shadow down. He influences Ahriman and Lucifer to act as adversaries against mankind. He also has the Azuras under him as his minions. But Steiner says little about these, perhaps because he thinks their influence is for later times, though I think that they are actually doing their nefarious work, their nefarious dark work, right now. Perhaps they have brought the plan forward, or the Dark Brotherhoods have summoned and released them already. They've brought them forward themselves. And Steiner writes about, gives a lecture about the black magicians, and he says, quote, "Only when a person has begun to learn the ABC of black magic, so to speak, is he on the dangerous path to the abyss. And this ABC consists in the fact that a person who becomes the disciple of a black magician is urged to kill life in a quite conscious way, to inflict as much pain as possible on life above all in the killing, and to feel a certain satisfaction in this infliction of pain. If the intention is to stab or cut into a living being with the intention of feeling bliss in its pain, then this is the ABC of the black arts. What goes beyond that cannot be touched upon. But you will find it hideous enough when you are told that the black magician beginner has to cut and stab into living flesh, not as the vivisector cuts. This is also something bad, but the essence of vivisection finds its overcoming in the vivisectors themselves. But whoever systematically cuts into the flesh and derives satisfaction from it begins to enter the slippery slope of black magic, and thereby the possibility is given for him to approach more and more that being, the two-horned beast." End quote. And in my country, England, the last few years has been a huge rise in knife crime. There are groups of teenagers who go out and just, obviously I'm not there when it's happening, but there's a lot of stabbings going on, sadly a lot of death. And whether they're being influenced by, I think they're being influenced by the dark forces to go and do this. There's also the idea of the initiation of coming into a gang by stabbing someone, which is awful, awful, awful. I'm just going to read some more Steiner. "This being itself, which we have characterized as the two-horned beast, we need only imagine that it is a seductive being of a quite different kind from man. It comes from other world periods, has taken on the tendencies of other world periods, and will feel deeply satisfied when it comes across beings such as these evil beings will be, who have refused to inwardly accept what can flow out of the earth as good. This being could have nothing from the earth. It saw the development on earth coming, but it said to itself, 'I am not so advanced with the earth that I can have anything from earthly existence.' This being could only have had something of the earth if it had been able to attain dominion at a certain moment, namely when the Christ principle descended to earth. If this Christ principle had been nipped in the bud at that time, if the Christ could have been overcome by the adversary, then, however, it would have been possible for the earth in its entirety to have fallen to this Sorat principle. This has not been the case, and so this being must be content with the waste that has not inclined itself to the Christ principle. With those people who have remained stuck in matter, they will be his hosts in the future." End quote. So when the next cycle comes round and the earth evolves into its next stage, all those that have not followed or embraced the Christ, but are black magicians or taken a dark path, they will be the hosts of Sorat in the next stage. They will help him have a kind of a body, but it's a body that may be It's not as he'll become still a two-horned beast, but created from all the dark forces and the dark happenings and occurrences that are happening now on this earth, and has been during the cycle of this planetary evolution. But I want to remind people, everybody has the chance of redemption. These black magicians, these people that fall into the dark ways, have the chance to be redeemed. They have the chance to take on the understanding, the love and the light of the Christ. Everybody has the choice in this life to either stumble in the dark or be lit by the light. That's what all these mysteries, these ancient mysteries, are here to reveal, really, and for good. Well, they were originally vowed, but the vow has lifted, and for good reason. You know, it seems a bit unfair for those who do not understand that this is a spiritual war, and that this is the way, as I put on my Mandalorian voice. We humans have free will. We have independence. We've got inner freedom. We also have a conscience, and it's whether we follow our conscience or not that is going to decide our fate. People are either drawn to this, you know, the light, or drawn to the darkness, or they sleepwalk through life unaware of the spiritual war that's going on. And most people are hardening to life. And when people become hard in themselves, in their heart, or in their bodies, or in their way of thinking, that is the dark false influence, you know, especially the sun demon. He is a dark false influence, whereas Christ is love and light in all senses of the word. This Sorat is the one that hardens everything. He hardened the planet Earth. He hardens our hearts, as I was saying. And Steiner says that he actually comes out of man's heads. You know, he influences our thoughts. He works evil forces out of man. And Steiner, I'm going to just quote here, he says, talking about Sorat, that his mission is to work in the evil forces of man. And he says the first appearance of the beast will be about 1933 to 35, which is, you know, sort of the beginning of the Second World War, though that was to come in a few years later, but the groundwork of that was starting. And the swastika used to be a sun symbol, but that was inverted by the Nazis, of course, who were being led, sadly, by the dark forces. So Sorat's mission with all the dark adversaries is to lead humanity astray from spiritual development and instead take them down a dark path. You know, this is the black magic. Sorat wants to disrupt the evolutionary path that is the part of the God's plan, and Steiner calls it the God's plan. Now, obviously, the godly path is love and light, but Sorat's path is pain, inflicted pain and suffering. You know, and I read the quote from Steiner about how he influences people to do that. And as I was saying, Christ is the Sun King. But according to Steiner, when Christ was crucified, he descended down into the earth. And Sorat, being the Sun King and the opposite of the Christ King, the Sun King, he also did the same. He's in the earth, and he can come back out of the earth and influence man through his head. So he's rising up out of the earth and tempts people to the dark side. And Steiner, he says that all this temptation of making people do horrible, heinous things, this is what holds the key to all the black magic, whereas Christ, who is also the Sun King, he holds the key to all the white magic. Sorat's using his Asuras as minions and slaves, these dark adversaries, to influence humanity and to bring them down and make them follow a left-hand path as they harden themselves, whereas Christ is leading us to the right, the white-hand path. But Steiner says in the future, in the far future, humanity will be divided into two types of people. There will be those that follow the white-hand path and those that follow the left-hand path. And the book of Revelation explains all this, which is why I highly recommend reading it. even though we have to read it with our spiritual eyes and listen to it with our spiritual ears. You know, and as I was saying, with them hardening, the dark forces hardening us all to life with this dark influence, this is going to help lead towards what's coming in the far future, the war against all. The war of all against all. Let me tell you a little bit about that. Thomas Hobbes wrote about this in his book Leviathan, and in Latin it's bellum omnium contra omnius, the war of all against all, where Steiner says people will be devoid of every kind of social instinct. There will be a lack of morality. Selflessness will be needed, but there won't be much of it. Humanity will be being driven by egotism and evil. And Steiner says that this will occur at the end of the end of the 6th human cycle. We're currently in the 5th human cycle, but this is going to happen at the end of the 6th human cycle and be the start of bring in the start of the 7th cycle, the next human cycling evolution. So this war of all against all is going to be part of a transition period. Humanity will be destroying itself in mutual strife, and sadly it will be humanity's own fault. But there will be a small group of people who will survive this war, those who follow the right-hand path. So like a white brotherhood, one could say. Folk that are Christ-filled. So only those who have turned to a spiritual life will survive. Steiner does say that if humanity does not develop itself, if it does go down the wrong path, it is possible that this war of all against all could happen at the end of the 20th century, which is now. Sometimes I feel like it is coming. You can see how people are hardening and turning against each other. You know, as I've already quoted, Steiner was saying, people will be devoid of every kind of social instinct. And that does seem to be happening. And gold is very important in this. Gold is the sun mineral element, and should be being used in a spiritual, soulful way, whereas Sorat influences people wrongly. He tries to take it down the alchemical path of the materialist alchemical path, the greed for gold, the materialistic point of view. You know, for example, King Philip the Fair of France, he wanted the Templars' gold, so he turned against them and put out an edict to have them all arrested. Whereas the Templars were Knights of the Sun, they were the Knights of Christ. You know, and I've talked many shows about alchemy and how we're here to transform ourselves from lead to gold. It's not just a physical material turning the metal lead to gold, it's also transforming ourselves into gold to become the sun beings that we should be. And Sorat will infiltrate all the schools that try to work with this kind of knowledge, with the alchemical treatise, as they say. Sorat is going to try and lead those away from developing themselves and make them think in a more materialistic way and misunderstand what it is to actually transform oneself. And as I was saying, Christ comes from the sun with light and love and warmth. Sorat comes with a shadow of darkness that cools the heart. Steiner talks about how in the year 666 AD, in a place called Gondashapur, there was an academy of wise men, which is in Persia, and this school had been running for many years, but it was now at its high point. And this academy, well, it had accumulated knowledge and wisdom from all the different cultures, but in this year 666, Sorat infiltrated this school and attempted to corrupt it by giving it knowledge that humanity was not ready for. And Steiner says we were still too immature for this knowledge. If we had been given it, you know, and this is my own analogy here, it would have been like giving children matches and leaving them to discover fire. And Sorat will continue to do this. He will continue to infiltrate societies and systems that are trying to keep to the white light brotherhood and try and turn it to the dark side. you yourselves will be tempted by it, the dark forces. I'm sure you've had all your own experiences of it, which is why I highly recommend reading the book of Revelation. He also links Sorat to the eighth sphere, which I know many people are interested in, and there's so much talk about that these days. What is the eighth sphere? From my own understanding of reading Steiner, this is the sphere, a fake sphere, a false sphere that Lucifer and Ahriman have been creating, which at some point, obviously from the orders of Sorat, the sun demon, for all those to be trapped in who do not follow a spiritual path. And Steiner writes, this is his lecture, I'm going to quote now, "But those who proved immature in the time of Venus Earth, who placed themselves under the dominion of Sorat, must now segregate themselves on a special globe, while the 7 others go down and up again. Thus the colony of Sorat falls out." And that's all about how all those trapped in there will then become part of the next being of Sorat in the next realm, is how I understand it, in the next cycle. I'm still looking into this. It is very hard to fathom the gist of. And I'm sure you've all found that there's many different shows and books out there on what this eighth sphere is. But just keep love and light in your heart. Stay on the right path, and you won't be pulled into it and be trapped. You will continue on the right path and be there on the right side, ready for helping the planet evolve and for humanity evolve. So, as I say, I recommend the Book of Revelation. I've got an audio version on my channel should you want to hear it. Steiner's book or the lectures of the Apocalypse of St. John, I highly recommend, because again he goes into all this kind of thing and the ideas of what is about the eighth sphere, about the sun demon, and how we can work against that and save our souls through the Christ, which I know many people still find difficult to take in, but we must take away the religious institutions of Christ and look at the esoteric meaning of who and what the Christ is, or Christ is. And as I've said before on other shows, if it hadn't been for Rudolf Steiner, I probably would never have understood the esoteric mission of Christ and our esoteric mission to work with the Christ, bring the Christ into us, not I, but Christ in me. May the Christ be in your hearts. Go forward with love and light. Thank you for watching and listening, and I look forward to any comments, or do contact me if you so wish. And thank you to all those that have been pressing the thanks button on my channel. I much appreciate it. Love and light to one and all.